What is up, people? Phoenix here. Yesterday I did an interview with the famous polyglot Chris Lonsdale, also known as 龙飞虎 in China, and he is a polyglot who speaks 6 languages. I asked him to share some of his methodologies and techniques with me. The interview was conducted in Mandarin, Chinese, Cantonese, and then English, particularly in that order. If you enjoy this video, please give this video a thumbs up, and you can also follow me on Instagram and Weibo. Alright, without further ado, let's jump right in.
我是一个地球人，四海为家。我是一个心理学家、语言学家，和教育家呢。我是6个月学会任何一种外语的作者。当然有我的 TEDx 讲，不只是一个，我有好几个。我是功夫英语的创始人，也是一个高级商务的顾问，包括心理顾问。很多人可能不知道，我也是一个探险家，和做了很多年的环保工作呢。
您的中文名就是龙飞虎，这个名字你是怎么取的？
我刚刚到了北京，他们就给你起一个名字嘛，你不能用那个英文字母了嘛，所以当时你知道吗？刚刚问个完了嘛，他们给什么名字呢？我的叫克莱斯特夫约翰朗斯戴夫。那第一，一点不像个名字；第二呢，第二人不会记住了。我就一个晚上睡觉的时候，我就起来就梦见了龙飞虎这个名字，所以我就决定就用这个了。特别好玩呢，我到了香港以后了，我去申请那个香港的身份证，我都要这个身份证上有中文的。然后呢，他们就说，为了能有中文，你必须能够写字儿啦。其实当时很多文盲在香港，很多老太太、老人呢，就都不会写中文的嘛。但我不跟他挑战这个，我就是拿笔就写了我的名字。他一看，行，那没办法，必须得给我。那很多窗口的那些政府工的过来看了，都在那笑。然后呢，他们都回去了。然后一会儿差不多1个小时了，有人走到那麦克风 ，pop pop pop， 龍飛虎16號場，然後我走過去，那個廳裏面應該是有100多人，他們就擰着頭就看着我走過去了。所以但是我的身份證有中文的，而且我的後代都有中文的。
那既然都講到這兒了，我們咁換下試下講廣東話啦。聽聞你講廣東話都得。
我廣東話應該過得去啫咩？喺香港好多年啊嘛，起碼揾到食咯，可以咁樣講。
係呢排係香港定係好耐以前係香港？
其實我係1984、85年去香港咯。咁一到啦就即刻開始學啫。4個月啦，應該可以好獨立啦，完全可以生存啦。
所以咧，你係先學咗普通話，跟住你學咗廣東話係嘛？
係啦，又唔係已經識普通話咧，廣東話就一啲唔難噶啦，就要習慣佢嗰啲音調啦，同普通話有啲唔同啊，同埋佢選擇用咩詞咧有啲分別啦嘛。普通話咧喝茶嘛，廣東話咪飲茶嘛。
我覺得廣東話最難嘅係佢音調，因為我東北人嚟㗎，我哈爾濱嘅，所以咧我廣東話咁多音調咧就我聽唔出嚟嘅，即係佢話佢錄音搞調嘛，但係我普通話即係4個音嚟㗎嘛，我聽唔出咁多嘅個音調。
音調咧雖然有一定嘅作用啦，但係佢唔係絕對啦，係相對嚟㗎。所以都係一種感覺啦。同譬如你講 Scottish 啊，同埋 London English 呢種嘢咧，都係一種文化嘅感覺為準。個音調啦唔係咁緊要啦，但係你嘅廣東話啦就好正啊！
多謝晒，
真係好正啦！好多北方人啦就捉唔到廣東話啲音啊，你都好正㗎啦，唔錯啦，真係㗎。
香港嘅朋友傾偈咧，佢話你東北口音就出嚟啦。
有少少啦，有少少啦，咁你可以當佢講你廣普啦就好好嘅啦，咪。
And since we're here, I'm going to switch gears to ask you some questions in English. If that's okay.
No problem. No problem.
So, what do you think are the biggest changes over the past 20 years in the language learning, language teaching industry, and what is the significance of learning languages in the 21st century?
Okay, well, they're both very big questions and quite different. So,
Yeah.
let's start with the first one. The simple answer is plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more they're the same. So if you look at language learning, okay, there's still classes. People still go to classes. So that hasn't changed. Some of those classes are done online. So going online, that's in my view a superficial change. It's not actually a fundamental change. It's still almost everywhere. It's grammar translation. It's remembering words. It's doing word lists. It's teaching grammar. Right. So really, the industry hasn't changed. An exception to that, to some extent, would be Pimsleur. Pimsleur's approach was to use audio only, and to gradually build up an understanding. So you would get a core, and then you'd build on that, and you build some more. But other than Pimsleur, really there hasn't been very much. Now, when we built Kung Fu English, we took into account everything that Pimsleur had done. We put in a whole lot of stuff from accelerated learning, from memory studies, plus a whole lot of other stuff that I had discovered over the years by myself through my own learning process, and then triangulated back and discovered that people like Stephen Krashen had been researching comprehensible input and all sorts of stuff. So pretty much everything that I arrived at had also been arrived at from other directions, but we took it and then put it into a system that people can use to learn English if they're Mandarin speakers. So
I just think it's very interesting that you are like simultaneously a language learner, like a practitioner of language learning, but a psychologist at the same time who works on language acquisition, second language acquisition, and at the same time you're learning languages. So you're both going after the theories as well as like putting it into practice. So I think it's really interesting to see what you come up with.
As someone once said, there's nothing quite so useful as a good theory.
Right. What do you think is the significance of learning languages in the 21st century?
Okay, well, first of all, if we don't, we're dead. I mean, the world is more and more interconnected. You have different cultures beginning to bump up against each other. These cultures all have their own specific set of mental models, and we need to understand those mental models of other people and our own in order to get beyond the differences and get to the commonalities. All right, that's absolutely key, right? So in order to do that, we have to learn each other's language. Now, you speak Cantonese, you speak English, you speak Mandarin. You will know that even in your body, the feeling of those languages is different. Right. The thoughts that you can access in each of those languages are actually going to be a little bit different. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, definitely. You would say things in English that you wouldn't necessarily say in Mandarin Chinese or in Cantonese. So I guess that slightly affects the way you think.
In Chinese, I could say, tui qiao, and there's no word in English that sums up tui qiao in the right way. It's got hesitancy, it's got respect, it's got uncertainty, but with desire, all in that little piece, right? to take that a step further, you're probably going to ask about, but what about AI and machine language learning and automatic translation? My answer is it doesn't cut it. It doesn't cut it. They've been trying for decades now, and they can't get beyond the current level. So even the stuff that they're doing with these massive statistical programs that do statistical analysis on the language and collocation and all that and give you best guess, it still doesn't allow you to do what language does, because language at the end of the day is a labeling system that allows humans to label their experience and share their experience with others via the labels. And the machines don't have that experience.
A lot of the words and phrases, they have such cultural and ideological implications that can't be interpreted by machines, by computers. Like in Chinese,
exactly.
The phrase like 家国天下, it has such a big cultural and ideological implication that just doesn't translate unless you know the word in Chinese. So my next question is, so in your talks, you've talked repetitively about the idea of 泡脑子, of I guess the immersion.
Brain soaking. The word in English I coined is brain soaking.
What do you think makes a piece of content a good input or a good material for practicing 泡脑子?
All right. Great question. 泡脑子 is a state. It's not related to content. Any language that you're hearing, it's not about reading, it's about hearing. Any language that you're hearing that you don't understand, and that quite often could be quite mushy because you're not even hearing it clearly, is stuff that you should be brain soaking with. So it's whenever you meet that sort of content, you just switch into a brain soaking state, which is you don't care about the meaning. You relax completely into this. You begin to pay attention to the rhythm, to the intonation, to the starts and stops and the feeling of the language. And if you have an opportunity where you're with people, you can also observe the environment and the body language. And if you're just listening, then you have no other sensory input. What's going to happen is your brain over time, quite quickly, is going to start to hear clearly what it wasn't hearing. So one of my experiences in listening to another language was, the recording quality is really bad. It's very unclear. And I listened for 3 days and I went, hang on a minute, the recording quality is fine.
Yeah, I think that's a really radical theory, because that's almost the complete opposite of the comprehensible input theory of Steve Cushion. Yeah, so what you just said is just listening to content. It doesn't matter if you can understand it or not. But according to the comprehensible input theory, you have to listen to the content where you can understand the majority of it.
No. If you actually, what Krashen is saying is that if the input is comprehensible, then you will acquire the language subconsciously. So when Krashen actually runs workshops, he will use body language to communicate the meaning as he's saying stuff in the target language. All right, so it's not doing input and not understanding it. The key is that the communication as a whole is understood, even if the language element of that communication is new to you.
So does it mean if you're listening to, let's say, a piece of audio that's like reading a passage in French, that's not as effective as actually watching French people talking to each other?
Yes, pretty much. The caveat would be, if you're watching French people talking to each other, you better understand from the other signals in the environment what they mean, right? If it's a high-level intellectual discussion in French using a lot of abstract language, then you're not going to have any hooks into that, and that's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to incorporate that into my language learning, because what I've been doing is just looking at, say, a word in Korean and then reach in my brain for the meaning in Chinese. And a lot of times it's they don't perfectly overlap, and that
lack of overlap is a killer. And if you're trying to do it that way, you're staying in your mother tongue, and you're getting these very weak connections to a translated element, and it never works. You need to work with the core of the language. So it could be 500 words, 200 to 500, which covers maybe 30% of daily use, and you get up to 1,000, you've got 85% covered. At that point, then you are just building around that core, but you have the essence of the language actually inside you, and that makes it actually pretty easy.
So how about we move on to the next question? So, but traditionally, I know from experience in China, people they prefer like learning through talking. I know it's not the case in schools, but the fashionable theory is that people should learn by talking to native speakers. When do you think is the appropriate timing for starting to actually talk and producing output?
It's a really, really good question. Part of the answer comes from looking at kids. What you'll see is kids spend a lot of time absorbing and creating a neural network in their head. Then they get to a point where they're comfortable to talk. That said, also if you look at kids from very, very early on, they're already doing part of the talking process. They're playing with sounds. They're trying to find in their mouth a way to use their muscles to make one particular sound. The mistake that adults make is that they want to wait, they want to keep doing input until the point where they can speak fluently. And that's a mistake. Yeah, I've known people who've done that and they never speak. The problem is that language fundamentally is a physiological process. The listening is physiological, like we talked about the filters, and that's why brain soaking matters. But speaking is physiological. The way you move your lips, your tongue, your throat, the other muscles in your face, that's a complicated thing to be doing. It's really complex. And so you need to practice it. It's like a martial arts move, right? You're not going to be able to do a spinning flying kick without practicing spinning and practicing kicking and practicing jumping and all of the components that then one day you can put together. Does that make sense as a metaphor?
Yeah, perfectly. So sometimes your muscles just don't move the way you want it to if you don't start talking. You just got to train your tongue, and sometimes the neurons just don't connect. Yeah. I've made that mistake multiple times when I learn multiple languages. That I try to accumulate as much input as possible before I start talking. But when I actually take class online or italki or something, the words just don't come out. Like I can understand the content perfectly, but I just can't make sentences.
Exactly, because you've not practiced the basic physiology to be able to say it. But again, kids, I think when people say that you talk when you're ready, they are not fully understanding what kids are going through. Kids will say baba, baba. They will say one word in response to a question. So they're already vocalizing to communicate. So my approach is do tons and tons of input, preferably where it's comprehensible. If not, then you're brain soaking. And then for your conscious mind to keep it happy, you focus on very small things that you practice until you can use them. So you're not trying to do 20 words today. You're going to do 给我. Right? And then for the rest of the day and tomorrow and probably the next day, the only thing you're saying is 给我. And then the next day you learn 茶. And then the day after that, maybe you learn 水. So you go to a restaurant, you go 给我茶. And that's all you can say, right? And you very quickly learn to say, how do you say that? You very quickly take something that you can start to use as a meaningful tool to get a reaction in real life, and you just start saying it. Then you get bored and you want to add a little piece. But the thing is not to try and do too much. It's just one little piece at a time that you practice until you can use it, and you're building your repertoire little bit. At the same time, at a subconscious level, you're absorbing a whole lot of stuff, and you get to a point where then you can start making connections, and you can start saying stuff and you go, hang on a minute, I never learned that. But you did. You just weren't aware of it.
Well, I'm definitely going to incorporate some of your techniques and your theories in my future learning, I think. And I've been unconsciously practicing what you've just said, some of what you just said unconsciously in my learning as well.
Brilliant. Awesome.
All right.
Great. A pleasure.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.